what the hell are you waiting for? And now you will know exactly what I deal with 99% of the time is the answer to that question. And when you said that a moment ago, how do you do it? I would change that question is, what drives you to do it? That's the question I would ask you, because the how is going to be your individual process. But the what is a thematic or a theme that I can gravitate to because I'll have it too. But then how I do it might be slightly different than you. And that's the architecture of it. Here is the architecture, but you, as the sovereign being that you are, and all of you listening to this beautiful show are as well, you get to choose your own adventure. So here's the schematics. Here's all the tools and the materials you have to create this beautiful adventure that you call your life. Are you using them? Are you trying to figure out how? What do you mean how? Yes, you can get some learning. Don't get me wrong. But eventually, somewhere down the road, it is going to be your adventure and your adventure alone to choose.
Ladies and gentlemen, you are welcome to the King Dems Podcast, where we share the stories of extraordinary people and dissect art. We are live, ladies and gentlemen. You once again welcome to the King Dems Podcast, and today I have with me a very, very, very special guest in the building. And of course, his name is Travis, not Scott, but Fox. How are you, Dr. Fox?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on the show, mate. And yeah, Travis Scott and I are related.
Wow.
Only by humanity. He's far better looking and far more talented than I am, man. Far better looking. Before I started the
podcast, I said the only Travis I know is Travis Scott, but now I know Travis Fox.
Fox, Scott, all sounds the same.
Yeah, it kind of sounds the same, and of course, sure. Fox is known for stealing, and of course, I guess the fox stole the meal from the lazy dog. I don't know.
Well, as long as you don't say, what does the fox say? And I hear that one more time, I'm going to jump off a bridge.
No way. That's not popular around here. Yeah. We are on the other side of the pond, I'm in London, England. Where are you in the United States?
I'm over on the West Coast.
West Coast, East Coast rivalry. Las Vegas. Wow. That is the fighting capital of the world, and of course the gambling capital of the world. Interesting. I'm very big on the UFC, and of course I know the UFC Apex is there. Do you like mixed martial arts?
I do. I used to be a martial artist when I was young, but fighting is a young man's game. I'm not interested in that. I haven't been to UFC since they were in the 200s, to give you an idea.
Wow, really?
Yeah, it's I don't know. It's just my own personal philosophy. I think you get to a point in time, and for me, for a point in time, obviously I'm not Dana White, but you get to a point, even Dana White, as you can see, he's moving into a more political space, and rightfully so. He's just earned the right. Yeah, earned the right.
Going into boxing now as well.
Correct, right? And where he's going, and I think he's been revolutionary in that space. Obviously, and the Fertitta brothers who started the whole thing have done very, very well for themselves, and I think they did a great job with Dana. For me, and you got to love it, mate. And I don't love it. I understand it. I respect it. And I respect the cauldron that those men and women go through to do, which is in nowadays world is 10 times more intense than anything I did back in my day, which was, 45 years ago. So, but I had the beautiful opportunity back in my day. I was around Sensei Joe Corley, Sensei Joe Lewis, and these are, the old PKA guys, where we, professional kickboxing kind of scenarios and that era. It's just a different world, man. These guys with their ground fighting skills, they are such accomplished fighters. I think that's fantastic. But as far as going and watching it, the thing that still bothers me is, and it's the same old thing, right? It's no different than you watch a Rocky movie, right? You come out and you're just charged up. Well, you add alcohol and in Vegas, sometimes that gets into a weird space.
Yeah.
UFC's really good about it. Yeah, UFC is really good about it. They're really good in their security, but it still charges people up. And at the era that I'm in life, I'm in a different space, only from the perspective of, I respect everything they do, no different than I do the bodybuilders, because I know what it takes to do that. My wife was a competitor, and I trained with her. And while I never stepped on the stage from that point of view, I know what it takes to do it, the dedication to do it. So when I see someone who's a bodybuilder, the first thing I do is walk up and say absolute respect, because I know the dedication, the discipline, and sacrifice.
It's a lot. It's a lot of sacrifice.
It is. We were competing hardcore for 2 years, and you're on meal prep, and there is no social life because you never go to a restaurant unless you want bread and water, and even then you're not touching the bread. So that pretty much narrows it down. It's a wonderful exploration of self-discipline, unlike anything.
Exactly.
I've been in athlete since I was 4 years old, and I did my time with golf, and took it to the show, and then I coached on tour for 10 years, and you're with that kind of discipline. I've always had discipline, but there's something I learned in the gym, and that's why I respect the MMA side, because these guys aren't just fighters.
Exactly.
Listen, this beautiful encompassing thing, but also too, I'm in the legacy phase of my life right now. I'm really focused on how can I pass this on to the next generation, to the younger, smarter, and far faster than I am. Not just from obviously from the fighting perspective, that's undoubt, but I'm talking about just from the business, the internet, AI, Web 3.0, where Web even 4, where it's headed, where all these things are headed. For me, my lane of expertise, if there is such a thing on this planet, is really working with personas and working with people on integration of self, and how they do that in company cultures, how we do that in business, how we do that in just relationships, and understanding that generally, even in this conversation you and I are having, my friend, is, there's multiple conversations going on in your head. There's multiple conversations going on in my head. And then we're all having conversations at the same time at the subconscious and superconscious or unconscious level, but making sense of that and understanding how to integrate that so that there is a cohesion. Now that takes
coherence as well.
Yeah. And definitely competence, coherence, context, content. Am I delivering the? Yeah.
Of course, a logical flow as well.
Right. You got, intuition versus logic, going simultaneously. But we've been, and part of what, my work has been over the last 35 years as Dr. Fox, and every company I've ever worked with, and every, person I've ever trained, every corporate client I work with, or any just entrepreneur where we work with is really, we're moving out of what's called the or era. And really for the last, several hundred years, we as a species are really moving on this or mentality. It's, tall or short, left or right, up or down. And the or creates delineation and creates this duplicitous or dualistic relationship that we're in. When, if you really look at it, and there's no other way to look at it, there is no such thing as or, but we've created an or society. And now we're starting to move.
There are gray areas in between.
Yeah, there's a lot of, and even more so gray areas. It's the only area I believe is the and era, which is we're moving into. So it's tall and short. It's left and right. It's, good and evil. It's light and dark. They're both happening simultaneously and concurrently and consistently happening. But we are the only species on this planet that can delineate and separate and say, oh, no. That didn't happen to me. That doesn't exist. It's over there. We would commonly call it compartmentalization or suppression or oppression or compression of however you'd internalize it. But we're the only species that can do that. You don't see a lion walking around the Serengeti going, well, I just feel like being a vegetarian today. I'm going to go hang out with the giraffes and stretch my neck. You don't see that. Nature has a very consistent and mentality. Humans have taken an or mentality in an effort to have some sense of control or divinity, or even from the perspective of we actually know what's going on. The reality check is we don't. We're all spinning around on this little marble called Earth in this massive universe that we can't tell whether it's the matrix and a construct, or is it real, because it's so tangibly and sensory overloading. It becomes sometimes you can't see the forest or the trees. So when you move into an and era, integration becomes easier because it's not this or that. Well, I'm only going to focus on my strengths. Okay, so then that means you're going to be lopsided. Or I'm only going to focus on developing my weaknesses. Okay, you're still lopsided, because the integration process has always been something that we've equated to trauma. Well, trauma is a part of that. That's true. But what about all those memories that you don't engage with, that you forgot? What about all the fantasies in your head? And I don't mean sexual. I mean just fantasies. Hey, I want to be successful, or I want to be whatever it is you want to dream about. I want to go to the moon, go to Mars. We don't integrate anymore. And furthermore, when we talk about integration, most people, and we've kind of done this as a species, we've associated that it's painful, that it's got to be this long, arduous process, or you've got to go do 10 pounds of ayahuasca to meet God, or that you need to sit in therapy until your eyeballs fall out of your head, repeating the same, how do you feel? And how do you feel? And what does that make you aware of? I'm like, those are all valuable things in parcels. But what about making it fun? What about making it easy? And I don't mean easy as in, I just went through a huge traumatic event. What I mean by making it easy is the process, the blueprint, because we are the most transformative creature on the planet. Probably up the known universe, right? We can transform into anything. The two gentlemen that are on this call, and every person watching your show, listening to your show right now, all of you can ask this simple. When you were 10 or 12 or 15 years old, and where you are now is not the same person.
Definitely not.
Whether you were choosing that or not, well, that's a different story. But the reality check is we are a transformative creature. We are like a diamond. We are multifaceted. And to say that you are a single level or a single dimensional faceted creature, well, with all due respect, only a divine creature can do that. Even to say I'm a single plane creature. Well, a divine creature is the only one that can compress itself to do that. Again, a lion can't compress himself and make him a groundhog. Not a lion's a lion, because that's all they're going to be. It's a single plane for them. And that's what the animal realm is about. But in the human realm, you are a cross and a dual existence, no different than dual path. You are a human being that happens to be a spiritual being's house simultaneously. So when we get into that concept, we start going, well, wait a minute, everyone, and I always have fun with we do our groups and our clients. And my first thing I start with is, how many of you believe in an afterlife? Of course, every hand goes up. I don't care whether they're Buddhist, a Christian, or they're Islamic. I don't care. That's up to you to determine your past. But all roads lead to Rome, right? Death is inevitable. And I always challenge people from the great Alan Watts. Alan Watts had a great quote, death is imminent, life is a choice. So get to it. The difference is, death has 1,000% batting average. Death has never lost, ever, in history. In fact, if you really want to push this down the line, death is the only thing that God doesn't stop.
So I'm going to take a line from the Game of Thrones, to say, what do you say to the god of death? You say, not today. And, there's a lot to unpack in everything that you've actually been saying. But then one thing that is very important is the evolution of us as a species. The Homo sapiens, human beings. You did touch when we were talking about mixed martial arts, younger, stronger, faster. Do you think the athletes, in this age and time, yourself, myself, understand mixed martial arts, and of course, it just started in 1993, so there's, a limited set of data to analyze on, other sports like boxing, football, soccer, that have been in existence for a really, really longer time, right? So that's one of the things, that really, really drove me into falling in love with the UFC, because it actually began within a time span when I was alive. I'm a millennial. I was born in 1992. I am 32, turning 33 this year. And the UFC started in, I think, 93? Yeah.
Somewhere there.
Yeah. Yes. So sometime around there. So for me, from a data perspective, by the way, I am a numbers guy. I have a finance background. I have a first degree in economics, a chartered accountant, what you guys call a CPA in the US. And of course, I have a master's in business administration. So that tells you that, okay, when it comes to numbers, we crunch numbers for a living.
Kind of your thing.
So basically, I said, okay, I grew up loving soccer in Nigeria. We call it football back home, and of course football in England. So, but of course, you guys have American football.
No,
That's
fair
football.
Play. A very, 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 very dear friend of mine owns one of the football teams over in Eastbourne, just to the south and to the west of London. And a couple years back, I flew over there and worked and coached the team and worked with the team on, not from a head coach, but from a psych perspective. So I've worked with athletes and obviously been one my whole career myself. So I respect the pitch and football. It's a very interesting game when you understand when you're on ground, as opposed to, hey, they just kick a bunch of ball around and try to get into a goal. I'm like, no, but that sounds really cool on paper.
Yes, definitely. And of course, looking at the evolution of the UFC, it's easy to track because of the limited data sets, right? You can run a correlation, you can run a regression analysis on, the evolution and of course the revolution of the UFC. But for me, my own observation is that the skill sets, right, improve over time. And of course, the level of competition increases over time. And of course, it's giving some fans the illusion that the UFC is becoming saturated. It is not becoming saturated. It's just that, more people have more access to information, right? And of course, more training techniques, better methods in terms of diet, nutrition, training, and the likes. And of course, you have more talents in the pool from different places in the world. For example, Nigeria, we had Israel Adesanya, we had Kamaru Usman become champions in the middleweights and welterweight divisions respectively. What would you say, even in football as well? I've noticed, it's become more competitive, unlike, the days of when I was growing up. We had like Zinedine Zidane, Beckham, Ronaldo, But
Right.
what do you think is happening to us as a species, right? Because we have more access to information, and of course, we have more access to genetic modification.
Yeah, great question. You're right. One of the things that, and I think this is where, applies to what we do, right? Each generation got better, and hence the or versus and era. And, I stand on the shoulders of great men and women over, the last 6 centuries to get to this space where developing the mystic persona system and how we have the blueprint of transformation. And you're seeing that transformation. So back to your point, it's not just information, but it's also to your point of analysis. Like you'll use AI, for example. When you go in there, you could go in there and say, give me a training regimen that I want to get down to 5% body fat. And I'm going to do that in a 6-month period. Tell me exactly what I need to do. Here's my nutrition. Here's my workout regimen. Here's my HIIT program. Here's how much, ground training I'm going to do. And it'll design that for you. Well, in my era, because I was born in 1970. So I'm coming out of college when you were coming onto the planet, respectfully said. So I grew up, what we're doing right now on this call didn't exist. There was a phone and a rotary dial, and that's what you got. You were stuck to the wall. You couldn't go anywhere. So watching how communication has changed, I think, is the biggest evolution. How we communicate. I grew up in an era where there was, like you so eloquently said, across the pond, mate. UK was there, but it's across the pond. And then Japan's on the other side on the big pond, right? And you stop on this little island called Hawaii, and we lived in different sectors of the world. That's obliterated. We don't live in that world anymore. We live in one world now. Like
the village.
Correct. So learning from, for example, Nigeria. Okay, that's fantastic. But unless you can fly to Nigeria, which is not easily done in my era, because back we were in DC-9s and DC-10s, it took bloody 30 hours. Nowadays you do it 9 hours, boom, I'm in Nigeria. Holy crap. So we're talking about communication, speed of communication, and most important, transportation. So I can get somewhere faster. So if I want to go work with a famous, let's say, Japanese samurai coach, and I want to work on my katana skills, well, I can do that online for one, like I do now. Didn't have that in my era. 2, I could get on a plane, and within 11 hours, I'm sitting in front of a grandmaster learning how to work with katanas. Or if I want to go down to Brazil and work with the masters for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu,
BJJ.
the Gracies. Yeah, I'm going to go work down with the Gracie family. Why wouldn't I? They're masters. But the point is the communication strategy. I could be on a call like we're doing right now, and I've done this. And, Michelle, my wife, and I have done this when we were, when she was competitively bodybuilding. Some of our coaches were not in the United States. Well, the posing coach, nutrition coach, some of your weight training coaches were in different locations. We would train using video. Well, that's an incredible skill set. It's not just the knowledge base access that we have both on the internet and now AI and then moving into Web3, but also to our communication abilities of that information, and then our ability to translate that communication into actionable experiences. Ergo, a podcast, or, hey, I'm going to now train, and you're going to watch me coach through the video and we can talk. I do this with, still with my golfers to this day. 90% of the things I work with, which is my philanthropic side, still working with players, and even with junior and college players, I'm not on the golf course on the range like I used to be. I'm on a video. I watch them send it back to me and I can adjust them in real time. That allows me to be multiple places simultaneously and them not to have to come to me. So the expense of information has also gone down. And then also, I think in that expense, we now start to niche into markets of specificity, where listening to your resume, impressive resume. But I know if I'm going to call a numbers guy, I know who I'm calling because he's going to give me everything I need to know because we've gotten so granular in our ability to analyze said information. So it's communication, the transportation ability, and how we transport ourselves, but also our analytical ability. I mean, we obviously we have augmented through AI is an incredible thing. And then in funny thing is we haven't even really got to AI's potential yet. When we really get into true AI versus language learning systems,
we're just scratching the surface.
Yeah, man, we've just scratched the surface of, whoa, crap. Soon, as James Cameron said it best, hey guys, I gave you the blueprint in 1984. Skynet is real. And now we're in that era where Skynet is truly real. And that becomes, challenging. So it forces individuals now to come to the position of what do I really want to do and what am I good at and how am I willing to go after it? So communication, transportation, specificity, and niche. And sometimes though, the downside of that is there is a downfall. There's a churn for that, where there's a segment of society that doesn't make that evolution. So then what happens to them? And I think to your point of competition, which I didn't address, which is the competition gets better. Yeah, but there's 8 billion people on the planet. So it should. In my era, we were pushing literally 6 billion. And yes, the competition was obviously great. I was in the era of, Muhammad Ali and Mike Tyson, and in the boxing era, MMA really didn't exist. We had you had individual competitions, but there was no one unifying organization. Boxing was probably the closest one to doing competitive sports, right? Now with MMA, it invites you to not only to be a niche fighter, but a niche fighter in every niche.
Uh-huh.
So the coagulation of information,
for a reason.
Right? Yeah, hence the term mixed martial arts. So instead of saying like, the great Sifu Bruce Lee, here's Kung Fu Wing Chun. That's really his base plates, and then he brings in all of these other styles after the fact. Well, he's an anomaly, no different than Guru Inosanto. Dan Inosanto, who I've had the pleasure of working with Guru, an amazing human being. And but again, those were the demigods of my era. Now anybody can be a demigod because you can take that information and assimilate it if you have the one thing, which is discipline. Now we're back to what we started with. But discipline, regardless of communication, transportation, niche market, discipline can either be taught or it can be evoked, meaning that you have it and you want to get better at it, or you can teach discipline. But without discipline, you're subject to the churning of an evolving species, and meaning humans right now, and we're evolving to the space where we are becoming in our demigod status. I say this with respect to all of us, but the evolution isn't humans. The evolution is our ability to communicate with AI. And when AI becomes its own conscious awareness, now there'll be another species on the planet that can go as fast as we can, if not faster. That's something we've never, right. That's something as a human, bar animals, like going back to, obviously humans and dinosaurs weren't on the same planet, but at the same time of the planet, but theoretically if we were there, T-Rex would still be the one kicking the snot out of us, right? They're the grand champion of the world as an example, because they eat people. Now, obviously animals still do that, but we've been able to create dominion, 99% of the world from that space. Now, obviously if you wander out into Serengeti, you're going to die. Ask me how I know. I've been to Serengeti. Lions will kill you, but it's not the lions.
The Kilimanjaro.
I have. I've climbed. Yeah, Queen Kilimanjaro. I've been there. And then, people are like, oh, you got to watch out for lions. I'm like, lions, bullshit. You got to watch out for the hippos and the water buffalo. Those guys are bloody dangerous, but you don't think that way. When you get there, you experience. My point being is we now have another species that is evolving on this planet that is not human, but it has intelligence. And that is obviously, what we call AI right now. AI really isn't AI now. It's still language learning systems, but it's evolving so rapidly in such a quantum, puns intended, space that it will literally eclipse us. Then what? We've never been in that position before as a species, realistically, in the modern era. And I say the modern era, let's call the last 2,000 years for safety, right? In the last 2,000 years, we've been the dominant species on the planet. We've never not been. That's something where we're going to find out what is the evolution of us and where are we going as a species with our communication, because all of those things are going to change, because then AI, the true AI, cognitive and conscious awareness AI, as we would define it by humans, when it gets to that space and its speed of calculation, transportation, and it has one component, well, it may empathize emotionally. It doesn't have emotions. So it does have one different species aspect to it that we don't, which is it can remove its emotional components. We can't. Well, that makes decision processing a hell of a lot easier from that point of view, because they don't get marred up in their head like we do. So if we become a problem, ergo the Terminator, if you look at James Cameron's entire Terminator franchise, humans are the problem. It becomes a logical conclusion. Now, you can ask damn near any human on the planet right now, are humans a problem? You'll get a yes. That's why we have wars and do stupid things that we do. And we've been doing that for 6,000 years because as Arnold Schwarzenegger says in Terminator 2, Judgment Day, it's a great line. He says, it's in your inherent nature to destroy yourselves. He's right. And you know why that is? Is because we're the only species that has delineated the OR method and says, well, my trauma and the things of my past, well, they're there. Bullshit. Stop saying that. They're not there. They're with you. They are still operating inside of you. You may have come to peace with them and you may have integrated them. We'll see. Most haven't. That's the reality check. What we've done so well is a self-hypnotic form of literally disassociation from our own experience. Now, that's a pretty cool thing to do as a species until you meet a species that doesn't do that. Ergo AI. AI doesn't forget. It doesn't have tie-ups. Well, geez, Travis, back in 1922 when we weren't even a computer yet, I'm still hung up that we were a punch card and I feel like I was beaten up and it doesn't say that shit. We do that. We create these traumas that we stay with and we define ourselves by them. AI doesn't do that. Well, we've never been faced with a species that can integrate everything.
And of course, it's a function of our mind.
Correct.
Right. And what is a good way to segue into your work, Mindscape? You've been called the Mindscape architect. So can you break down what that means and, how it connects to entrepreneurship and business success?
Yeah, thanks for asking. So a Mindscape architect is exactly what it sounds like. It is, we have architecture for everything in this world. So when I say architecture, I mean, we architect cities, we architect books, we architect, obviously, the internet. We architect buildings, we architect houses. Yeah, the list goes on. We have all these plans, but we say we do, but we really don't have a blueprint on how to navigate us, which to me has always been this striving curiosity question since I can remember. Maybe I was a philosopher in a previous life, whatever. I've always been tied to that model because it asks us to ask the question of, who am I? Where do I come from? What is the meaning and purpose of this life? Do I believe in an afterlife? Which, by the way, and those will be listening, have some fun with this. If you believe in an afterlife, then you have to ask yourself this question. Where'd you come from? How'd you get here? Right?
On the previous
and that
slide.
really starts opening up these questions of, time, how do we do time construction, time-space construction, and even moving back into some of Einstein's, theoretical physics and philosophies of time-space, and how do we quantify that without going too deep down the rabbit hole. But let's ask some of these powerful questions. What we are so good at, and really became the backbone of everything that I've been curious and have been since I was 13 years old, is the ability for us to self-hypnotize into things that we know that aren't true for us, that we'll convince ourselves to believe are true, we'll compromise ourselves to be true, yet we know deep down inside in places we don't want to talk about at cocktail parties because it's not as cool, it's not my image, is death is coming. Death is non-negotiable. Like I said, God doesn't even stop death. And I don't sound that to be, as a fantasy or fantasize about death, but death is real. And what we do is, and the great Alan Watts said it so well, we're all marching straight towards death at 100 billion miles an hour, knowing there's not a damn thing we can do about it except for distract ourselves from that moment.
Huh.
Okay.
Hypnosis, your background is psychology and clinical hypnotherapy.
Correct.
But how has this, unique expertise helped to shape your approach to life and business?
Well, it brought the and world into my world, because I've always struggled with, we live in a dualistic world. My father was an agnostic. He was a pilot, so he's very left brain, very emotionally disassociative. And I would ask my dad, I'm like, well, Dad, do you believe in afterlife? No. Well, how'd you get here? Well, I was just born. What? I mean, my brain still to this day cannot wrap around when people make those comments to me. I'm like, did you just spontaneously combust? What are you, the Big Bang Theory in a microcosmic version? What the hell are you talking about? And I'm okay with that if that's what they believe, but most people don't even know why they believe what they believe. Most of us are walking around in a self-hypnotic state, a topic I know a little bit about. And so I walk around, and even I did to a certain degree until my mentor and master was like, are you ready to finally figure out what the hell we've been doing all this work for? And I'm like, yeah. He goes, the truth is you can't hypnotize people. And it's not because they're not able to be hypnotized. It's because they've already been hypnotized. They do it to themselves every single freaking moment. And we don't realize we're doing it, which makes us, in a certain aspect, the most dangerous creature on the planet, not unto ourselves, but to our fellow man and woman, because we're like a kid with a sword. We don't realize what we're doing to ourselves when we're hypnotizing ourselves to stop looking at things that we know are meaningful. You know it. You know that all this material success, and believe me, I've had it too. We've had all this material success, does not do one damn day longer of this life. Ask Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs, the great Steve Jobs, the CEO of Apple, who's changed all of our lives, didn't stop his death. Not all his money did another day buy. And we know that, but we're so scared to look at it because when we look at it, it looks back and it says, yeah, this is coming. So the question really becomes, what's interesting to you? And then you get to ask yourself this really cool question. And this is where Mindscaping Architect comes back. It comes into the equation is, what if we had a schematic, an architectural blueprint that says, okay, here's all the different personas that we tend to operate through. Here's the path of insights. Here's the path of whispers. Here's the shadow realm. Here's the oracle realm. And there's two other realms we deal with later. But to really go and say, hey, how do I integrate that back in so that I can truly live an experiential life that has meaning for me, not from a narcissistic point of view, but from a self point of view. And I'm not talking about self-centered. I'm talking about centered in self. Those are two very different concepts, right? And some people are, self-centered, and that's fine. But which self are they centered around? Because I'm like, you're not a singular dimensional creature. But if you want to play that game again, self-hypnosis defined. We're right back to where we started. And you can see this loop where people do this all day, and guilty as charged myself, And so when we look at that concept, why don't we have a blueprint for that? So Mindscape Architect is, hey, look, your mind, not your brain. Those are, again, two very different things. One's organic, one is non-organic, right? Tangible, non-tangible, the seen and the unseen, if you want to go that direction.
Mm-hmm.
We don't really have a blueprint to navigate all these voices in our head. And people say, well, I don't have any voices in my head. I'm like, you're the first person I want to talk to, because yes, you do. So let's stop that joke. My favorite one is people say, well, I don't have any personas. I'm like, that's the first persona we're going to talk about. Is the one you're acting like you don't.
Classic case of
classic
self-hypnosis.
Right, yeah. Oh, I don't have any personas. Yeah, you probably got 7 or 8 going simultaneously. We all do. And the difference is, are we choosing that persona because we are actively, unconsciously, and consciously, simultaneously choosing that? What is the reason behind our choicing, and are we aware of that? Or are we unconsciously moving into that model from a fear mechanism, from a trauma mechanism, from an ambition mechanism, but we don't realize that we're doing it? And there's no right or wrong in there. There's no judgment in it. There's no, well, you need to do it this way because Travis Fox said to. I don't care. What I care about is, why don't we teach people to have at least an awareness of a blueprint? Or say, well, if I'm going to build the house of Travis, or I'm going to build the house of whatever your name is, at least have an awareness of what are the aspects, the tools, the materials that will construct the house, if you will, the castle of you, of your life, and be able to transform it at will. Because to say that you do the same things day in and day out is the biggest self-hypnosis joke in the history of the planet, except for maybe brushing your teeth. That's habitual. However, we are transitional creatures. Here goes a perfect example. 15 years ago, what the hell's a podcast? How's a podcast? What are you talking about? Why is it called a podcast? Because Steve Jobs started the word pod, and it became Apple and became this thing. And okay, great. But what does a podcast really mean? Well, now today it's a marketing tool. Is it? Or what is it? I don't know.
I'm going to stop you in your tracks, because I have a few things to say.
Go ahead.
To cover what you're saying. So I think you beat me to it. I was reading in between the lines of what you were saying, and the self-awareness thing was what was ringing in my head. And of course, when you said it, I was like smiling. Okay, this guy gets me. I don't know if you're a mind reader as well as a hypnotist, but a lot of people are not self-aware.
Well, define self-awareness. So let's play this game. Let's have the listeners have some fun. Yeah. I admire you for asking. It's a powerful question, and you're on point. But when we say self-awareness, the word self psycholinguistically means singular.
Yeah,
so
singular.
who the hell's talking? What self-singular are you aware of? Which one? Who's talking? Who? This is a favorite question. People say, I or me. Me or I. Well, I think, and I always ask them, like, great. Who's I in that sentence? Who's talking to me? Who's talking in your head right now? And if you don't know self-awareness, to using your language, how the hell am I supposed to know? And if I don't know, I don't have a blueprint. I don't have a model or an understanding of myself and the reflective of self, meaning me talking to you, vice versa. How the hell are we really talking? And what self is talking to what self? And now, are you talking from an automated point of view? Am I talking from an automated point of view? Am I talking from a conscious competence point of view? Am I talking from an unconscious incompetence point of view? So we use this rudimentary thing called language. We'll use this one as English as a perfect example. English is a terrible language. It's a horrible language. It is rudimentary and basic. And half the time, the words don't mean damn bit of sense. They not make sense, but we don't really know how to apply them. And we assume that we understand each other in the context of that content that we're conveying. And then 99% of the time, it's miscommunication. We fly right by each other because we think we're saying the same thing. Like, oh, most people aren't self-aware. In a macro comment, and let's say let's say communication strategies on a global scale, we understand what we're saying. I understand the intention of what you're saying. But when we really drive down to, we're having a conversation of meaningful impact.
Content and the context, that's what it is here.
Right.
In terms of the content stage, it is sort of general. But then in terms of the context, now we're narrowing down what persona is actually having this conversation. So for me, I would say the persona that is a podcaster. And I was going to drive towards something, when I was younger, I always loved communication. And I grew up, my father's house was at the back of a radio station and TV station, the very first one in Nigeria. the very first private one in Nigeria. And, when I was going to uni, I told my dad, I want to study mass communication. And of course, he stopped me in my tracks right there. It was like, no way. The only way you can pick that course is if you are going to pay the school fees by yourself. And of course, like, it just stuck in my head. I'm like, whoa. So this is not going to let me do what I want to do.
See,
it's like,
that's a perfect example. So that entire experience was really your dad talking through you. So your dad has a persona, and it's not called the dad persona. That's a different persona, right? It sounds like your dad falls in what's called the herald line. And that could be, depending on whether we're on the inside of whispers, that could be an enchanter, or that could be, an entertainer. An entertainer is not someone who's like, dun, dun, da, da, da. There's actual concepts. Like, for example, most people believe the gladiator persona means fight, like MMA. This is, I'm a gladiator, I'm a warrior, I was Rome and Colosseum. I'm like, no, that's a warrior. That's different. A gladiator has intentional purpose and is driven by a thematic called ambition. It is the gladiator that gets you up every day to go to that gym and not half-ass it. It's the gladiator in you that says, I want to be the best podcaster on the planet. It is the gladiator in you that gets up and says, I'm going to go do 80% of the work that I know generates, this 20% results. And I'm going to continue to do that because the gladiator understands ambition. It is the thematic that drives us. But again, social hypnosis says that a gladiator's, I got to get their fight. You got to grind. I got to kick butt. And I'm like, no, that's a completely different ideology. So first of all, we're saying to ourselves, this is who I'm being, but I'm using a different word. Immediately our brain goes, huh? And it locks up. And we get half-assed results, which is why you go to the gym one day and you're like, this sucks, man. My workout's crap. I can't max it out. Then you have days where you're on point because you're aligned, but you're consciously aware of your alignment and you're choosing it as opposed to decision. And there's a difference between choice and decision. And most people don't get that either. I'm like, choice is active. Decision is automated. You just think, puns intended, think being the operative word, that you're involved. You're not. You just became aware of it. It was made at an unconscious level, driven to the subconscious. The emotions were brought in, and then you became aware of the thing called a decision. Oh,
hey, should I give you a fun fact? You did mention that. You did mention that 15 years ago, there isn't such a thing called a podcast, right?
Yeah, I think it was 15 years. Don't quote the actual year, John.
No. There's something I'm driving towards. So
okay.
I just did a quick fact check. 15 years ago was when I was getting into university. And what was in my head is I always wanted to be a broadcaster. But thankfully, my father led me on another line and I became a finance professional because African parents will always want you to be a mainstream professional so that it can be sort of like a social insurance for you as an individual so you don't ever go hungry. But we see what's happening. The world is changing. And of course, there are new professions, new occupations that are evolving at the speed of light.
Like an influencer, a TikToker, a YouTuber. Those didn't exist.
But you see what's happening, right? In our age and time, back then, 15 years ago, a broadcaster was, the mainstream line
media.
of the media. But then now a podcaster is now the mainstream media. So it means like I had always had that ambition, and persona of being a media personality.
Well, and even look at the word broadcaster.
Okay, so
you could broadcast with a bullhorn. You could do it on a podcast. You could do it on behind a news desk. You could do it on radio. There's a internet, obviously. So broadcaster, again, this is where we're talking about the niche talent back at the first part of this conversation was, we have communication, transportation, and niching down. Broadcaster would be in that gap between transportation and niche market. I want to be a broadcaster. What exactly a type of broadcaster do you want to be? In this case, we're talking about podcasting. So podcasting, yes, is definitely broadcasting, especially from my era, because there was, we basically had film as a broadcast medium, television, and radio. That was pretty much it. And so now you have all these different ways, but I also think that's very unique. We're back to your original point, which is so valid. It's not that we have access to more knowledge. We have access to more people. And we've now got cross-collateralization in culturalization. Like as you and I talked about before the show, having been to Africa several times myself and, everyone says to go to Africa to change your life. Well, damn, it did. It changed mine. I mean, going to Tanzania and sitting in the Serengeti and seeing 50,000 years of this is the way the world worked before humans got civilized. And then going to Queen Kilimanjaro, and she, like I said in the video, you're a grain of sand of a grain of sand of a grain of sand. She's been here 1 billion years. You're not gonna move her. She's gonna move you. She's gonna decide if you get off that mountain alive. No different than the Great Mount Everest. But those experiences ground you into something far larger than yourself. And I think that's the essence, that we are on the precipice of either A, and this is now we're in the or era, we're going to stay in this ideology of, well, we're either going to evolve as a species or we're going to dissolve into this AI Ready Player One de facto mindset. And we already started doing that post, 2020, with everybody being in a locked space. Things came to you, right? Back in the world, my day, what the hell's a DoorDash? What's Instacart? What do you mean you could deliver groceries to my door and I don't even have to get out of my house? Wow. This is the Jetsons. This is great. I grew up in the Flintstones era. We actually had to go out and find the Brontosaurus burger and bring it home. This is amazing. But when you look at that either or mentality, as opposed to saying, hey, in our effort to integrate into this next level of evolution of humanity, which is the cyborg of us, if you will, the AI integration, puns intended, but staying grounded and remember, you are terminal, whether you like it or not. You can give me all the BS you want about what could or could, until someone tells me and proves the model, which should be interesting to do, that we can actually last beyond 100, 110 years in this physical being, this body form. We're terminal. AI is not. It's eternal. Therefore, how do we make that hybridization? How do we make that blend, as opposed to it's one or the other? Or how do we lose our grounding? And how do we remember the things like, for example, AI can do a wonderful many things, but AI cannot take you to sit you on the Serengeti and watch a pride of lions in their natural habitat, being lions, not in a zoo, just being lions. And by the way, if you step too far, you piss them off. Well, it creates a different level of connectivity, humility that AI can't generate. Not at this time, at least not in my experience of it. And so how do we balance then the blending and integration of this intelligence and this evolving of us as a species, but also reminding them we're still on planet Earth. And without that grounding and of awareness of what's going on around us, ergo going, Africa is a very special place. If you haven't been there, the energy is different. It feels different. Ground on the ground, it feels different. And I've been on every continent on the planet myself, and each one has a different energy signature, in my humble opinion, from Australia to India to Dubai. Everyone has a slightly different, but Africa has this strong roots, puns intended, grounding experience that brings you back to, damn.
Organic.
Organic is a great word. Well played, sir. It brings you back to, damn, what is really meaningful? And at least it did for me. I can't speak for everybody. The other people that I've had the opportunity to, I use this term loosely, coach their experience of summiting Kilimanjaro, because each one's it's a subjective experience, and each time you go up there, Queen Kilimanjaro will determine your experience, whether you get off the mountain or not. Same thing with King Everest. And so you look at that, it is transformative. Why? Because of that very thing. It is organic. Queen Kilimanjaro is protected. They don't bring plastic on there. They really take care of her, and she honors that back. But she also gives you the grounding of, I've been here 1 billion years. So when you think you're all that in a bag of chips, remember, you're a blip. You're not even a blip of a blip of a blip. And it was a humbling experience for me when you get up around 15,000 feet and there's no plants, there's rocks. You're like, holy crap. But those rocks are also part of that experience. And so for me, it was really getting super grounded, but also seeing the 6,000 square miles, I believe Serengeti is, if my memory serves correctly. But I also had some other experiences. Now let's take this to the human side. Unlike many other people, I had the beautiful opportunity. I lived with the Maasai for a week as a Maasai, and I learned much from the Maasai tribe. I learned, I learned gratitude. No, this is, well, right on the border, technically, yes. It was more on the Tanzania side because Kenya was a little unstable, as I'm sure you're quite aware. It was a little weird at the time. But also the one that even took me to a next step during that same experience, because I was there for over a month in Africa, because you got to be in country for a while. Don't think you come to Africa for 3 days and do a world tour. You're going to miss everything. In my opinion, you got to be with the people, man. You got to get down with the people, and I love the people. They were, and I still do to this day. And I still have friends over there that I stay in touch with every day. But I also I spent 4 days, not because of them, but because of me, with the Hadzabe, which is the oldest nomadic tribe in all of Africa. They're 50,000 years old, and they are truly nomadic. There's no houses, there's no running water. You're nomadic. And it was a great experience because, here in the United States, and I say this with the utmost respect, we do things like, well, we have to have a gratitude journal and we need to write our gratitude. Bullshit. Go live as a nomad, a bona fide nomad. You will experience gratitude to the basics of things like air. I got down to such granularity because we live in a world that everything is done for you. We really don't pay attention to it, right? Well, we just go to the grocery store and food's mysteriously there. We go to a restaurant and wow, it just shows up. And I get this cup of coffee that, I don't have to think about the 19 steps that it took to get that bean into your cup and all the people that affected and the families. We don't think that way. We think, if I just get it, I'm done. Well, with the Hadzabe, you're up at 4 a.m. There's no alarm clock. It's called the sun. It wakes your ass up.
Yeah, the cock crow.
Precisely. And if you want to go to the bathroom, get up and find the nearest bush, sweetheart, but make sure it's not too close. And if you want a cup of coffee, tough noogies, you're not getting it because it's not a cup of coffee. And if you want a fire, you're going to flint it. I learned how to flint fire. And if you want to sharpen your knife, you're going to do it off a rock the old way. And you're going to make your arrows. And that's what you're preparing for. That's your morning routine, because then you're going to go out and hunt. Because it's not like you go to the local grocery store, you go to your local coffee shop. And that's where I started to really do gratitude. And when I was with them, I remember the very first hunt I went on, I was like, I'm a white guy. I don't know shit about hunting. What are you talking about? I'm going to screw it up. And they taught me how to hunt and and from their point of view. And one of the things that was really stark aware to me was my hypocrisy of taking for granted that I can go to a grocery store and just buy something and it's there. And all the people that have made that possible for me, and that I could have a cup of coffee. And well, the cup of coffee is something we do here as a drug addiction in the United States, where we pay $70 for a cup of coffee. Okay, that's insane. But moreover, just a cup of coffee, the experience of it and what it takes to have that, and just to have the beans ready. And having been to Costa Rica more times than I can count, and been with the crop growers and learned about coffee from that experience, it spun me out of, damn, I am the most ungrateful individual. I take everything for granted in this self-hypnosis that I'm not even aware. And it took me going to Africa and to be with the Hadzabe, who I have honored to this day, that they allowed me to be with them, because I'm in their world. They're not in mine. I'm asking to be a guest, which means, when in Rome, you're a Roman. And in this case, when you're a Hadzabe, you're a Hadzabe. I remember our first hunt, we walked 6 miles in the African bush to get
back to the hunter-gatherer era. But, I have this curiosity, and
yeah,
it is this. You experienced that organic feel in Africa, but I am African, and I understand the strong force, that is present in the land of Africa. The word Africa is derived from the Greek. Is it Greek or Latin word? It's something along the lines of the land that is free from cold. Yeah, so something along those lines, free from cold, free from evils. So
it was cold on top of Kilimanjaro. It was -10 the day I went there.
Definitely.
But in general.
Yeah, definitely not as cold as the North Pole, definitely not as cold as Europe. But what I'm curious about is, did you experience a spiritual awakening across
nature?
Not only
likes. It was cataclysmic.
Is highly, highly spiritual, deeply spiritual.
Sitting with the elders at the Maasai was one of the most powerful experiences. I mean, they're amazing dancers, as you undoubtedly know. I mean, their jump ability, the jewelry around their neck, the stories, how they consider wealth. Sitting with the elders was a transformative experience. Sitting with the Hadzabe, who to this day, I will tell you, are some of the happiest people I've ever met on this planet. And I've been from Australia to Japan, to South Africa, to South America. And they're all amazingly happy people, but the Hadzabe were happy for no reason. They were just happy to be happy. And I thought, holy hell, we have to go to classes and stuff and get your joy back. What do you mean get your joy back? You're alive. How's that start? Let's start with basically breathing, which we forget about because we take it for granted. And everybody listening to this call, you're going, yeah, you're right. I do take that for granted. But then as soon as this podcast is over, you go right back asleep. We don't think about it anymore. You thank God our breathing's autonomic, because we'd all die because we'd forget to breathe because we're so focused on other crap. I'm like, time out, guys. When you're on your last breath, trust me, you're focused on breathing. And I've had the beautiful opportunity and honor to be with 3 different individuals who took their last breath, and I watched them take it with them. And trust me, nothing was more interesting than that breath at that moment. And being present as they said goodbye. They didn't care about how much money they made and what stocks they bought and how many houses they had and how many followers and subs they had. None of that was interesting to them. They're adventures that I want everyone to experience, if that's what you want to experience in this life, but never, ever, ever disconnect. I think Africa was so powerful from that perspective. for me because of its roots. You know, it has such a rich history of humanity that goes all the way back that we're at least we're aware of. But, you know, even going up into Egypt, and I spent many, many weeks in Egypt and blown away at Egypt, just absolutely flabbergasted. No pictures compare until you actually stand there and see the absolute precision that this culture worked with and has lasted through eons. It's mind-boggling. And again, I've been Rome and Greece, and those are equally as powerful. But there's something about Egypt that really pulls your brain into holy hell. Wow. Or even in Peru, where you go down to Peru and you see the, I call it Sexy Woman. That's not its actual pronouncing name, but it's the famous temple that you look at these rocks. These are megalithic rocks that are literally down to the millimeter. You can't even get a 10-penny nail. You can't get a piece of paper in these damn things. There's no cement. How the hell did they do that? I mean, so when you start looking at these
ancient civilizations and, you know, the technologies, it's really, really, really amazing.
Unbelievable. But until you experience that, and that's the part that I invite people all to, I don't mean travel to travel. Get away from the tourist crap. Go be with the people. I've learned more about myself being with people from all cultures, from Bhutan to Africa to India, to Dubai, Greece, Rome, Spain, UK, you name it. Japan, Korea, Thailand, China, being with every culture, and each one has their own value, no doubt, and their own intelligence and their own history. Being with them and understanding the personas and being with that persona. One thing I was common is we are all the same from the underneath the skin point of view, right?
That is the funny thing. That is the funny thing. I myself, you know, I love to travel as well. I've been to a few places. I've been to Morocco. I've been to the Atlas Mountains. You know, when you're at the top of the Atlas Mountains, it's just a humbling experience.
Kilimanjaro, Everest, K2.
Humbling. Even the desert as well.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, go to the
humbling.
Sahara. Yeah, go to the Sahara and look at the dunes and how tall they are. And you're like, holy hell, this used to be a forest? What?
And then somebody will come and tell me that there is no God.
Right. And, you know, I have a very, very dear friend out of Los Angeles. We've known each other for 40 years, and he's an optometrist, like his father. And I remember when we were both going through university, and I asked him, I said, point blank, and he's Orthodox Jewish. And I said to him, I said, hey, brother, I said, you know, I'm just really curious. How do you know there's a God? Right? But I understand the Torah. I mean, I haven't read it in Hebrew because I don't speak Hebrew, but I've read the English version of it, the translated version of it. They called the Old Testament, cover to cover, multiple times. How do you know there's a God? You know what his answer was? It wasn't some theological answer based on the Torah or, hey, based on, you know, a philosophy. He said, have you ever seen the human eyeball? I said, well, yeah, I've got two in my head. He goes, no. Do you understand how it's made? I said, well, not like you. So he walks me through it, you know, rods and the cones and how the cornea works. It's the fastest, you know, organic, and how the cells will blend together and reform the cornea in real time. It's one of the fastest healing parts of the human body. But it takes this light, it's inverted, and our brain turns it around. And all of these things are happening simultaneously, and it's made out of 80% water. I almost fell out of my chair. I said, what do you mean? He goes, think about something that is literally a liquid material that has been state changed enough to be an eyeball that can take image from outside perspective, convert it into something that you can comprehend what it is. You can see the colors of it, right? And you can see the depth perception of it. You can see all of these different aspects to it and depth perception, and it regenerates itself, and you haven't had a damn thing to do with it. It does it all by itself. And he goes, now tell me there's not a God. Because only a God could create that. And I said,
I can do that.
Damn good answer, brother. I said, wow. And it stuck with me for over the last 30 years. And to this day, you know, he's an incredible doctor, and he's my doctor to this day. So when I go to him, and, you know, that's what he's chosen to think. But it was a beautiful analogy. And I chose, obviously, through Mindscape architecture of going, the mind is a beautiful thing. I'm not talking about the brain. I'm talking about the mind, you know, as an operating system. But we don't have a blueprint to do that allows us to transform at will. Now, let's be theological for a second, regardless of ideology. I don't care what theology any of you believe in. I don't care whether you're Christian, you're Jew, you're Islamic, you're Buddhist, you're Krishna, you're a Taoist. None of those are interesting to me, because all roads lead to Rome. You're going to face death no matter what religion you believe in. On the other side of that, that's whatever you believe, and you'll find out when you get there. The difference is, yeah, right. I tend to believe that we're all connected. Again, I think the best way to experience that in this plane is go travel. Grab a backpack and march your ass into someone else's culture and say, please teach me. And shut up and listen.
And learn.
and learn. When I was with the Aboriginals and I spent a week with them, I learned how stupid I am unaware of the natural environment of Australia. What I mean by stupid, not intelligence, unawareness, because I don't know what I don't know. And I remember walking, and Gabby, who was the number 2 in that tribe, I'm up in Darwin, Australia, and 3 hours to the east of a place called Kakadu. Been around for 50,000 years, and hieroglyphics are there. It's a famous national park. But on the side is the Aboriginals, and you have to be invited. It's their country. No different than we have here in the United States. We have the Native American Indians. It's their country. Huh? And spending a week with him, he actually walked barefoot in the bush, like literally barefoot. I'm over here with all this gear on thinking I'm hot shit. And he's like, what do you got all that crap on? I'm like, well, I got my hiking boots on, and I got my thing on, and I got my camera, and I got my pocket knife. And he's like, what are you doing, mate? I'm like, I'm going out to the bush, man. He goes, no, you're not. He goes, we're doing a walkabout. I'm like, what shit? So just different perspective. But I remember walking, and Gabby, his name was Gabby, incredible individual, taught me much. And one of the most spiritual experiences I ever had was in the outback with him. And it was not planned. It just happened.
The organic connection you get with walking barefoot, in such places is magical.
It's so true. And it didn't make sense to me at the time. Flash forward, 10 years later, working out barefoot. So when we train in the gym, we train barefooted so that we truly are balancing ourselves based on our feet, not on the shoes that tell me how, because when you walk on stage, you're on shoes, right? Unless you're, in the male category, then sometimes we do it barefoot. But women have to walk on shoes. So you have to have a really good sense of awareness of your balance. But if you're constantly training in shoes, in tennis shoes, but then you're performing in let's say heels as an example, it's a different organic structure. So work out barefooted and you get a natural balance of yourself, and your body naturally will equal again, and both sides work simultaneously, left and right. And I learned that in Australia, ironically. And so I all my years in golf, I golf barefooted. People are like, you need to wear spikes. I'm like, no, I don't. I can walk around barefoot. It's grass. Maybe you haven't noticed. I'm like, what about sand? I'm like, it's called the beach. You go to the beach and you will wear shoes. Why the hell are you wearing in a bunker? What are you talking about? I said, but grounding gives me the effect of what am I really feeling? What is the topography? How am I connected? Where's my energy not connected? But learning all those awareness things, like from in Australia, I remember walking right by and he goes, hey mate, there's a croc right there. And I'm like, what? And I remember looking over, and I kid you not, no more than 5 yards, maybe 10 on the outside. There's a huge ass croc right there. And my brain immediately associated, I never even saw that croc. Yet I was looking for them, but I didn't know what I was looking for. Now we're back to Mindscape architecting. Everybody wants to go into their mind and integrate the unconscious into the conscious. We all do somewhere, even at an unconscious level, you still want to. We want to write our traumas. We want to get out of our own way. I want to, stop browbeating myself in my head and that negative voice and get rid of my negative thoughts. Well, if you don't know what you're looking for, you'll never see it. You'll never find it because your mind is the one that set up the traps for you to not see it.
I think I did lose you for a while. I really can't hear you. Okay. I did lose you for a while. Okay.
That was weird. Yeah.
The mind is a really, really powerful tool. And of course, your work, involves breaking mental barriers, So what are the common mental roadblocks, entrepreneurs, business people face? And of course, what's that connection between your body of work and how you help entrepreneurs?
Great question. The number one barrier I work with is that there's a barrier. It's true. It's no different than we said earlier in the interview. When the first thing I ask people, I go, what persona are you wearing right now? People say, I don't wear personas. That's the first one. I'm like, unawareness of you are wearing one. Even now, you and I are wearing multiple personas. Yes,
definitely,
you're a broadcaster. Yeah. Yes, I'm the interviewee, and I'm Dr. Fox, and we're talking from Africa to you. All these personas are going on. There's nothing wrong with them. Just being aware of them, but it makes it more fun to go, hey man, right now I'm kind of in my sage enchanter personas. What does that mean? Well, my sage is coming from the wisdom of walking the path that I've walked, but my entertainer is making that wisdom not so stoic, but more fun. So I'm blending two of my personas together. Right? You're taking a beautiful finance aspect and saying, well, I'm going to take that, but I'm going to put it in a broadcast space. I'm going to take the finance era and put it in a broadcast space where I can make money doing what I love to do, but also be a messenger, which is also the herald. So I start to understand how I'm doing it. But then I get to understand, am I doing it from the path of insights or am I doing it from the path of whispers? And then, the path of whispers will eventually, when you ignore those whispers, those voices in your head, the barriers that you're referring to, like, I'm not good enough. I'll never get there. I'm not smart enough. I could never be a broadcaster. I'm not good looking. I could never be an influencer. I can't seem to figure out the algorithm. I'm all this other nonsense. I'm like, guys, The number one thing is just consistently showing up. But that barrier requires that you're tagged into your ambition. That's the gladiator line. And most people aren't tagged into ambition. We think we're ambitious because I want to make $1 million a month, or I want to be, the greatest influence in the history of life. And I want to be like Mr. Beast as an example over on YouTube, now Amazon, or I want to be Gary Vee or Joe Rogan, another one, right? All great accomplished individuals. But why would you want to be them?
Everybody's taking just be yourself.
Well, we're back to the singular. Be yourself. But in order to mindscapely architect the self, the true self, you've got to navigate the landmines of your mind, commonly called the personas, the masks we all wear. And we wear them for a plethora of reasons. But the number one barrier that is one, that there's a barrier. But two, the reality check is we are the only creature that is so good at downplaying ourselves and not believing ourselves. Now, ask yourself this question. Listen to that sentence, and I'm going to say it in the first person. I don't believe in myself. Who's I in that sentence exactly talking? Because how does the I not believe in self? Just between those two, that comment, there's two in that sentence, the I and the self. I don't believe in myself. So who's the myself and who's the I that doesn't believe in myself? So there, right there, you already know you're in mind. You're in a persona system. So you have these two voices talking to you, and you're going, well, where do they come from? I would never think that. You got to be kidding me. I mean, I'm the most optimistic person I know. Who's that person talking? So now we get to start doing self-exploration, but instead of a pointing the finger kind of point of view, I get to see it reflected back to me like, damn, you know what I love about him? He's chosen to do numbers because he did the traditional, because I'll use the African, parents as the line, but he's turned that into a WizMage component because the WizMage is the numbers. WizMage is analytical. WizMage understands how to use that data, but he's turned the broadcaster, which is the herald. So you've taken two of your core four personas and you blended the two into become this thing. Well, what's that called? Well, that's what this system actually is about, because in a quadratic model, you're one of four. That's it. That's impossible. That's bloody impossible. Right? Even in the hybridization of those quadratic models, there's hybridization models. Well, there's 16. Bullshit. There's thousands of the combinations. And when you start to see, what if three of my personas got together and formed something else?
That hybridization actually makes for an excellent combination that brings efficiency. And of course, if you mix it up with consistency and discipline, there's really no limit to what, it can achieve.
Yeah, you're not only are you on the point, but let's ask this other question. There is no limit. Number one thing I deal with is, where do we limit ourselves? You know the famous great quote from the great Nelson Mandela. We're not afraid of what we aren't. We're afraid of what we really are. I'm paraphrasing, of course, but we're really afraid of that. You know why we're afraid of that? Because we're conditioned to believe we're not divine.
And of course, I'm going to chip in another quote from Nelson Mandela. He says, if we try, we may fail, but if we don't, we have failed. A lot of people create limits in their heads, right? And they don't even try at all. I've seen a very disturbing statistic. I saw that 90% of podcasters quit in the first year of podcasting. And of course, a lot of people give it credit. Yeah, a lot of people give it credit for the consistency. They ask, like, how have you been able to be consistent? Like, regardless of my schedule, I will always drop an episode every week for the past 1 year and 4 months. Then how do you do that? It takes like a lot of discipline, sacrifice.
Look, can I jump in that one? I'd love you for this. Thank you for opening this door. This is what Mindscaping are all about. Is what makes it fun for me, because I have no passion about it, as you can clearly tell. None. This to me is the most interesting thing. I'm like, what is more interesting in your life? Any of you listening to this or watching this show right now, and thank you for the opportunity to continue to broadcast this message on shows like yours. And I do want to thank you for that, because it takes that.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Thank you. What is most interesting in your life, except for the exploration and transformation of yourself to have the adventure of a lifetime? You were not put on this planet to work for 40 years, pass it on to the next generation, and fucking die. Get over yourself. Excuse my French, but I am done with this shit. Watching people, the travesty and injustice of people not experiencing that makes no sense. That's like going to a theme park and sitting on the bench while everyone else rides the bloody rides. Are you bloody kidding me, mate? Everyone We all know the end game is the same. To say that the end game is different for anybody else is the biggest lie in the history of humanity. Death comes for us all. So if we know that, and there's no way around it, and if you don't believe me, ask the numbers guy. We'll talk about the data. We're talking trillions of lives, humans and animal alike. Death comes as a transition. Otherwise, if we don't believe that death is a transitionary state or an experience, you might as well take every major religion and philosophy we have on the planet and scrap it. It is a lie of epic proportions.
Toss it in a bin.
You call Elon Musk, put it in the spaceship and ship it off to Mars because that's where it's going to be worth something, maybe in the new civilization. But if we believe that in any fashion or format, I don't care what your theology is, right? All roads lead to the same transitional point, and we transition. Therefore, in order to have that kind of a cataclysmic transition called death from this life to the next, whatever that is for your belief structure, then you must subscribe. During your time here, you are in a constant state of transition. And to deny that is insanely, in my opinion, insanely insane. Because you're on the largest
insane travesty.
It's insane travesty, yeah, if I can use the word. It's, look at it from this point of view. You got gifted, so did I. Everyone on the planet right now who's breathing and alive on the planet at this current moment, whether, whatever stage of life is irrelevant. You are on the ultimate theme park called Earth, where there is not a single experience that if you want to experience it, it exists right now. There's nothing new, maybe different versions of it, right? But it's nothing new. So if everything on this planet is available to you, like Alan Watts said, get with it, man. What are you waiting for? Because life is shorter than snot. I mean, it's like bang. I mean, I'll give you a perfect example. I have the maturity of a 16-year-old boy. Like chronologically, I'm 54. Why? Because I chose a theme of my life is curiosity and adventure. And I don't mean like, oh my God, this is great. I'm going to jump off the Burj Khalifa and just see if I can splat on the bottom. No, that's Tom Cruise. Tom Cruise likes to do his own stunts. I've been to Burj Khalifa. I'm not jumping off that building. It's a beautiful building. I'm not jumping off it. Hell no. That is not an experience I choose to experience. But you could if you wanted to. And many people have. So when you start looking at it, you have every opportunity now more than ever in the human history with the and era coming together, our communication, our transportation, our ability to learn and experience. What the hell are you waiting for? And now you will know exactly what I deal with 99% of the time is the answer to that question. And when you said that a moment ago, how do you do it? I would change that question is, what drives you to do it? That's the question I would ask you, because the how is going to be your individual process. But the what is a thematic or a theme that I can gravitate to because I'll have it too. But then how I do it might be slightly different than you. And that's the architecture of it. Here's the architecture, but you, as the sovereign being that you are, and all of you listening to this beautiful show are as well, you get to choose your own adventure. So here's the schematics. Here's all the tools and the materials you have to create this beautiful adventure that you call your life. Are you using them? Are you trying to figure out how? What do you mean how? Yes, you can get some learning, don't get me wrong, but eventually somewhere down the road, it is going to be your adventure and your adventure alone to choose. But if you're not clear on what is driving you, what is the theme? Mine is curiosity and adventure. The adventure of exploring myself and everyone around me and putting that into a space of transformational experiential experiences, whether it's from the Hadza Bay, having a beautiful podcast like this, working with corporate clients, walking on a golf course barefooted. All have equal value experientially. What I do them for is completely different. That is the multidimensional aspects of us. And being aware of that, doesn't that make your life what it is? Because we all say this. So every one of you, and by the way, let's put it on the table. So some of you go, well, Travis, what are you, because I can hear the personas talking. I'm used to it. Many of you are familiar with the movie The Secret. Yes? Okay, well, I had the beautiful honor in 2020. I was one of the co-producers and I was also in the sequel. So I co-produced the sequel to that movie of Beyond the Secret of what did we learn in 20 years? And the one thing that we haven't learned, and I was one of the few people that brought it up, and I love every person in that film. They're all amazing teachers in their own right. But again, you're getting segments of it. And that was one of our complaints was we're showing you to a vision board and you do this. And those are pieces. How about this whole thing? And the first thing I said when the other producer said, okay, Travis, we're going to, it's your day to film. Okay, I'm on the other side of the camera now. And I hadn't been there for a while, and they're like, well, what do you think we've learned? I said, we've not learned to go to the beautiful darkness yet. I said, we have ignored the darkness, and we have categorized darkness as evil. There is darkness, and then there's evil. Those are two different realms. Darkness is the place we hide things that we don't want seen. You all have one. It's called your closet. Every house has one. You throw all the crap in there that when you need it, you know where to find it. But otherwise, it stays behind your closet door. Hence the term coming out of the closet, and whatever that might mean. I don't mean that in any specific way. Just we come out of the closet about, hey, these are the things I've been dealing with or not dealing with. But until you look at the darkness and reintegrate it back into you, it was an experience, a thought, a said, an action, a non-action that you experienced on this theme park called Planet Earth. To act like it didn't happen, to ignore it, is literally shutting down a part of you. Well, we're back to where we started. Only a divine creature having a humanistic experience, the duality, human and spirit, and happening simultaneously, can do that. And to deny yourself of that further validates you're a divine creature. So we're right back to this beautiful loop of when will you get to experience that decision? That depends if you're willing to look in the darkness of the limitation of yourself, because only you are limiting you. You're a perfect example. I'm a trailer park kid. I didn't grow up with a silver spoon in my mouth. And I'm not saying that I'm all that in a bag of chips. What I am saying is I'm a transformative creature. And what is more interesting than transforming into that which you seek to become? But you already are here internally. But until I integrate all of those tools, materials, and aspects of this beautiful thing that we call humanity, you're right. I may never transform into whatever that is. But you can. And a Mindscape architect, particularly what I do, and specifically with the personas, is how you do it. And then what my life's work is, I don't want you to rely on Travis Fox. That's a fool's errand. Don't follow Travis Fox, and don't follow any damn guru for that matter, because they're just as screwed up as you are, because they're on the planet, which means they're on the planet. They may be a great teacher, but they're still on the planet, which means they have the same challenges we do, terminal experience, everything we've talked about. But if you have a blueprint, now you get to choose the adventure because you know where to insert by choice. I'm choosing to transform into this. I'm choosing not to transform into that. I'm letting go of that aspect of it. I'm integrating this back in. And now all of a sudden, you become this beautiful architect of your life. But that's what you always have been. But we've been programmed ourselves to believe that we're not. But if you have the blueprint and you have the tools to do it, which is very easily done now it's fun. Now all of a sudden I go, well, do you know, those dreams that I thought were out of touch, become a broadcaster? It's 3 steps, mate. Yeah, you're right. And then it's the consistency. What drives you to do this for a year and 4 months? What drives you? Well, there's something driving you. What is it?
I am going to give you that answer.
Please.
It's 2 P's, right? Purpose drives passion.
Does it?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, for a very long time, I think until I was like nearly clocking 30, I was always struggling with what really is the purpose? What really is the purpose? Why am I doing all of this finance work? Why am I just here? But then, with age and experience and time, you discover that, pretty much for me, this is my philosophy. I stand, to be, what I say, to be debated with, but really everybody has to contribute within this ecosystem. Right. And everyone has gifts. So I'll take you to the parable of the talents in the Bible. There was a servant who was given 1 talent, another 7 given 2 talents, another 7 given 5 talents. And of course, for me, I identified my own talent, as, communication. I discovered everywhere I go, I have spoken with people from all the continents in the world. Mm-hmm. And if they understand English, they are able to connect with me better than any other person in the room. And of course, it was clear you have to use this for a good purpose. And of course, if you're gifted, if you're given a talent, you're pretty much wasting your mind space and the earth space if you're not utilizing it. And of course, you have accountability to the God who gave you that talent. And so for me, I decided, I have to use it and use it in a good way to add value to people, to make impact, to inspire people, to educate people. I used to be a teacher before. I taught a
Go
lot of
figure.
professional students. Yeah. So a lot of chartered accountants have actually, passed through my tutelage, and they will tell you that I'm actually a fantastic teacher. And of course, that involves communication as well. I
Mhm.
devised, very unique means of, of drilling down the information even to people who do not understand the concept of accounting at all. So that being said, I say the purpose inspired the passion, and of course, now combined with the gift, right? So it made it to make sense. But then it will never achieve an impact if there isn't that discipline and work ethic. The discipline and work ethic is very, very important because that will help you to stay to stay motivated and stay resilient. I did see something somewhere someday say anytime motivation is an issue, discipline keeps you going.
I think that's
That
an
is
honor. I thank you for sharing that with me. I would say then, how would you address the people that say, okay, well, I've got my purpose, but I don't have the passion or the drive or the ambition to do it. How would you solve that?
so if you figure your purpose, right, you just need to devise a way. And of course, for me, I'm very, very big on consistency. I did read a book on 10,000 hours, sometime when I was a teenager,
Sure.
right? If you
Mastery.
devote 10,000 hours to anything in this life, you will become a master at it. You don't. So a lot of people think, oh, they need to put in wholesale efforts into something, right? Chip the block every day, and of course, you'll see that you'll achieve a whole lot that you can't believe. So for me, right from people saw that I started podcasting in November 2023,
Mhm.
never knew that as a teenager, I was already speaking with a man in my church who had a master's in communication language arts.
Mm.
So as early as 16 years old, you know, I was already learning communication. I was reading books on communication, Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People, The Art of Public Speaking, you know, reading books on communication. I was transcribing the English language, the phonetic alphabets. I could
Mhm.
do all of those things, you know, but at the age of, I think, 31, yeah, saw me morphing into a podcaster, and they're like, oh wow, did you go to school for this thing? Like, how come you finance guy, numbers guy, become 10,000 hours, right, if you keep working at it, and of course, I did did a bit of roles here and there relating to communication, and of course teaching as well. So you just keep refining yourself until you get it. So it's not like they say all roads lead to Rome, and of course Rome was not built in a day. That's what I'll just say.
Mm. I would say something like this. I'd like, hey, you know what I've heard you? I've heard you take your WizMage, which is the beautiful power of analytics and power of observation. You've combined it with your Herald, which is the bringer of good news, the messenger, the one that is going to bring the message, right? And here we go, the good news. If I can use I believe it's a Christian background you're referring to when you said church, right? Is that fair?
Hmm.
So that would be the Herald, right? I'm bringing the good news. John the Baptist would be one of the ones who heralds the good news of the coming of Christ, as an example, before the baptism, in the wilderness. So when we talk about the Wismage and the Herald combined, but I think you underestimate the power of your gladiator line, which is your ambition, which is why I brought the question up. I know a lot of people who know their purpose they have not connected that with their ambition yet. They have not connected with the analytical state of what are the steps I need to do, chip away at my 10,000 hours so that I can feel like I'm making progress and not have the whispers come along and say, well, you're never going to make it 10,000 hours. Come on, get out of your head. What are you talking about? You're dreaming, man. Nobody on this podcast has ever heard those words ever, both internally or external, right? We've all heard them. So you look at that concept and you're going, well, wait a minute. If I understand what parts of me are and the combining of those parts, well, crap. Now I'm a master architect, but you always were. It doesn't take 10,000 hours to be a master architect. The difference is understanding how to combine those tools into an architectural framework. No different than the numbers that you use. Yes, I can add and I can divide just like, but the way you do your SWOTs and your analysis is exponentially more powerful than because you've taken all the tools, all the aspects, all of the ambition, and you turn it into you. So when I talk to people all the time, I'm constantly asking those questions, but giving it in a way that makes sense. So for example, if I were to sit there and say to you, hey man, what if I could give you a system that would allow you to, at any given moment, just go, hey, this is who I am, and this is the whole sequence to do, kind of like a blueprint, right? You call it. I always kind of chuckle at having an architect in your pocket, and I don't mean me. But for example, if I said to you, okay, what if I just showed you one of those and said, hey man, are you aware of the shade inside of you? Tell you what the shade is, but then there's the blueprint. So you actually understand the voice, and you get the choice. Do I want to go further down this road? Do I want to go into the path of the shadows, or do I want to go into the insights? Or want to do both? Because now, which is the number one thing, back all the way to your original question, what is the number one thing I deal with? The self-imposed limitations all of a sudden stop.
Wow.
Okay.
All right. We have G Marshall. We have G Marshall, and of course, it means I need to head into the next session.
Yeah, we've been talking for a while, haven't we?
I am telling you, it's been a while, but I think we need a second session with you.
I would be honored.
Absolutely need a second session with you.
I would be honored.
Thank you very much for your time today, and of course, it's love and respect for me. And please do schedule that second session. And of course, I will see you. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Jimmy's all yours.
Bye, Travis.